In this video, we're going to go through some of the more advanced features of the 7D Mark II. We're going to have a look at how the mode dials work and what effect that has on our images. Let's take a closer look together. To start with, I'm going to explore the time value mode on the 7D Mark II. This allows me to change the shutter speed on the camera using the top multifunction dial that we looked at in the first video, which is going to allow me to change my shutter speed to add effect to my image. So I've adjusted my top dial to TV mode, and I've used my top multifunction wheel to slow my shutter speed down to a 30th of a second. I'm using live view here so you can see exactly what I see. To start with, I'm going to put my spinner in motion and take a photo. You'll notice in playback of this image, you can see the motion of the object, which can really tell a story in some cases. Let's look at the opposite effect if we speed up that shutter speed to a 1,000th of a second. Again, using my top multifunction dial, I'm going to increase my shutter speed to 1/1000th of a second. I'm going to put my spinner in motion and take another photo. Let's have a look. Now you'll notice in playback that my motion has been completely arrested by the shutter speed. So a great example of using a fast shutter speed may be shooting a bird in flight, for example. All the feathers perfectly crisp and motionless. On the other hand, if you were shooting a slow shutter speed, potentially you could use this for motorsport to show a panning effect, to show that the car is actually in motion and not just parked. Why not play with the shutter speed on your camera in the field? Try fast, try slow, and see what the effects are. In this next part, we're going to explore depth of field. To do this, I'm going to put the camera into AV mode, pressing in the center of the mode dial and flicking it around to the AV setting. You'll notice now on the rear screen that I'm presented with an F number. At the moment, it's set to f5.6. If I use my top multifunction wheel, I can adjust this up or down in numbers. To start with, I'm going to put the camera into live view so you can see what I see. To begin with, I've got my camera set to f5.6 at this moment, which gives me a fairly shallow depth of field. What does that actually mean? Let's take a photo and have a look. So you'll notice in this photo when I play it back, the object in the foreground is in focus, and the further we look into the background, the more out of focus that becomes. A low f-stop number is fantastic for taking portraits in a busy scene to separate the subject from the background. Now let's have a look at what effect the f-stop has if we increase this number to, let's say, f22. Using my top multifunction dial, I'm going to turn the camera up to f22. Again, I'm going to go into live view so you can see what we're doing. Now we've got the exact same scene. I'm going to focus and take the shot. In playback now, you'll notice that all three objects are in focus. So I've got infinite depth of field at f22. f22 would be fantastic for landscapes, sunrises and sunsets, times when the foreground is as important as the background. One tip though, when stopping your lens down this far, is you'll generally want to use a tripod. The next feature we're going to have a look at is manual mode. To select this, again, I'm going to go to my mode dial on top, press on the center locking button, and choose the M function on the top dial. When we're in manual mode, we have full control of the shutter speed and aperture. To change the shutter speed, we would use our top multifunction dial. Turn to the left to decrease speed, turning to the right to increase speed. If I want to change my aperture, I would use the rear multifunction wheel. Turning to the right to increase my aperture, turning to the left to decrease my aperture. Another adjustment that's potentially possible when you're in manual is to adjust your ISO. To do this, we would use the top ISO key. And when I push that, it presents me with a menu that gives me options from automatic right through to 12,800 ISO. To adjust this ISO, we simply push the key and then use our top multifunction dial to navigate through to the desired speed setting that we wish to use. We can either let the camera time out or we can press set to confirm that setting. Another handy little feature to point out is you'll notice the ISO key has a little dimple on it. This is so at nighttime, you can feel across the top of those four keys and you'll be able to identify the ISO key quite easily. So now we're out and about and we want to take photos of birds in flight. How do we do that? A great feature of this camera is its ability to shoot at 10 frames per second. This is ideal when shooting high-speed action and sport. Let's explore together how to activate this feature and what other options are available. Firstly, to get into our drive menus, we can push the drive button, which is the second key on the top. Within the drive modes, you'll notice that there's a few options. There's single shot, which is signified by a single box. Right next to that is multiple boxes with the letter H. You'll notice that there's the high-speed continuous mode. This is what will activate the 10 frames per second function of the 7D Mark II. There's also a low speed continuous option. So if 10 frames is too fast for what you're working with, you can slow it down to a customizable frame number between 4 and 8 frames per second. There's also a silent shooting mode, which is signified by a box with the letter S next to it. Silent shooting modes may be handy if you were shooting, say, a sleeping baby, for example, or trying to be as quiet as possible in taking your images. There's also a multiple frame silent shooting mode. This won't achieve 10 frames per second, but it will give you a burst rate of between 6 and 7 frames per second as quietly as possible. The next option is a self timer, which is defaulted to 10 seconds. This is perfect if you want to stand in the family portrait, set the camera up on a tripod, push the button, you've got 10 seconds to get in frame and smile. The last option here is a self timer of 2 seconds. The 2-second self timer is fantastic if you're about to attempt a long exposure, at nighttime for example, and you've left behind your cable release remote. This will allow you to activate the camera, take your hands clear of the camera and tripod, and allow the shake to be reduced before the frame is taken. Another thing we need to look at is focusing modes. And you'll notice when we looked at the drive key, it gave us some options for autofocusing at the top of the screen. These options were One Shot, AI Servo, and AI Focus. Let's take a closer look at what these three mean. First, I'm going to start with One Shot. The default for your camera is to be set in One Shot. What this means is when I half press the button on top, we hear a beep. This is locking the focus until I push a little bit harder and take the photo. One Shot is perfect for staged portraits, landscapes, shooting things that don't move. But what happens if they do move? Kids, sport, birds in flight. If I select that AF button, I have the ability to navigate to two other modes, AI Focus and AI Servo. Let's look at AI Servo first. When I push this button halfway, you'll notice the camera does not beep. That's because in this mode, it is continuously focusing on whatever is moving within the AF points. AF Servo is perfect for moving subjects, approaching or going further away from the camera. Perfect for shooting on the sidelines at a game of football or something that's moving in the distance. The last option in here is AI Focus. AI Focus is a hybrid mode between One Shot and AI Servo. Essentially, the camera will decide whether your subject is moving or stationary and put you in the right autofocus mode. To the left of this button, you'll notice one that says WB and has the picture of an eyelid. This is our white balance and metering adjustment. Let's push this and explore what happens next. This camera allows us to change our metering modes between evaluative, partial, spot metering, and center weighted. To change this, we simply push the WB metering mode button. To change our metering modes, we use the top multifunction dial to navigate the 4 individual options. Also within this screen, you'll notice white balance is adjustable. To adjust our white balance, we use the rear multifunction dial. AWB is the default setting. It stands for auto white balance. This allows the camera to measure the light when you're shooting and adjust the white balance to what it thinks is correct. If you would like to override the automatic white balance, you can push this button and change to preset settings such as daylight, shade, cloudy, tungsten, fluorescent, flash. You also have the option at the end to set a custom white balance. Another key on top to explore is the ISO key. This is the one that has the dimple on it. When I push this button, it gives me options to change my ISO. Using the top multifunction dial, I can choose anything from automatic and 16,000 ISO out of the box. You'll also notice 2 other values which are grayed out, H1 and H2, which represent 25,000 and 51,000 ISO. Let's go into the menus and find out how to activate this. So on the rear of the camera at the top left, you'll notice a menu button. If you use this joystick to navigate the menus, you will find an ISO speed settings option. Just simply press set and we'll have a look at what we've got in there. To start with, we've got the ISO speed settings, which are currently set to automatic. Next, you'll notice there's an ISO range. This is where we can activate our H1 and H2 ISO capabilities of the camera. Come down to ISO range, press set, come across to the maximum value, and you can now increase this to H2. Press set to confirm, down to OK, set one more time. Now when we have a look at our ISO key, you'll notice that H1, 25,600 ISO, and H2, 51,000 ISO are now available to be selected. The second function of this key is flash compensation. By using this button, we can activate the screen, and we can then use the rear wheel to increase or decrease how much output we get from our inbuilt flash. If we were to have an external flash connected, this feature will also control that external speed light. An example of when you may do this is if you're taking a photo and you find the flash too overpowering, you can use this feature to dial it back a little bit. Or if you're not seeing enough power, you can use this button to increase that flash. That last button on top there, little picture of a light bulb, it simply illuminates the top screen. This is very handy if you are shooting astronomy at night or in a dark place where you want to be able to see your settings quickly and easily and you don't want to have to turn on a torch. Let's talk about changing autofocus points. The key to use to get into our autofocus points is the top right-hand key. When we press this, we're presented with a screen with all of the potential focus points available. We can then use the rear joystick here to move those focus points around the screen according to where we would like the subject to be. Here's a handy trick for you. If your autofocus point is over on the far left and you want to get back to the center as quick as possible, all you need to do is press that autofocus option key and then press in on the center of your joystick on the rear. And this will jump the autofocus point straight back to the center, no matter where it was on your screen. Now, to change the grouping options, when we press this button, we're presented with different grouping options. At the moment, you'll see that my camera is set to single point only. So apart from moving that single box around the screen, we're also presented with some different options about grouping. To change between that and the other options, we can use this rear multifunction dial, change to expanded 5 group area, a 9 group, a larger group, a 19 point group, or a 65 point autofocus group. If I have one of the expanded 9 point groups, I can use that joystick again to move that around the screen where I wish to. Again, we can use the shortcut pushing in on the center of the stick to jump straight back to the center if we need to. These expanded groups are handy if you're shooting action and you're not quite sure which way the subject's going to go. You can increase that group to increase your chances of getting the shot. Like many of the EOS models, the 7D Mark II will also shoot video. Let's have a look at what buttons we need to use to get into these modes. As you'll remember from our 101 video, the start-stop button at the top right-hand side of the camera will allow us to turn on and off live view. To get into our video shooting function mode, we simply need to change the toggle on the outside of that dial across to video. The first thing you'll notice is that live view will turn on. This is because the mirror box has to retract to allow the light exposure to the sensor. All of your settings are relevant from stills photography. If you want to shoot in manual and control your shutter speed and aperture in video mode, you can do so, the same way as you would in your still photography. The only difference in video mode is rather than pushing the front shutter release button to take a photo, we would now use the start-stop button to start and stop our video. You'll notice at the top right-hand corner of the screen, a small red dot appears. This just signifies that the camera is recording. You may also notice a little red light down to the bottom right here flashing. This is signifying that the memory card is being either read or written to at this stage. This is normal. To stop our video recording, we simply hit start stop again. There are some options for resolution in video. To get to these, we've got to go into our menu, navigate across until we see movie record quality. This will be found in the 4th red menu. A couple of options in here is whether we want to shoot MOV or MP4. We can simply select and change using the rear multifunction dial and set key to confirm. The 7D Mark II will do full high definition video at 50 frames per second. It also has options for 25 frames per second in various compressions, as well as HD and VGA quality video, depending on what you're recording and what your outcome is desired. Another great feature of this model is the inbuilt intervalometer. Let's have a look at how to activate it and where we'll find it. To get to it, we push our menu button and navigate through our red menus till we find our 4th red menu. Come down, you'll see interval timer. Press set. Come across to enabled. And before I hit go, I'm going to hit the info button at the top left. This allows me to adjust the interval timer in hours, minutes, and seconds, as well as the amount of shots I would like to take. To change our amount of shots, we can select between 1 and 99 photos. If I need more than 99 photos, I simply select 00. This will give us an unlimited, infinite amount of photos, as long as there's room on the memory card and battery life. To change our interval time, we can simply select seconds, minutes, or hours, press set, and adjust accordingly. Once I hit OK, you'll notice that the interval timer no longer says disabled, and it confirms that it's going to take a photo every 10 seconds, for an unlimited amount of frames. Another quick indicator on this model to see that it has been activated, you may see on the top screen a little indicator to show that the intervalometer is active. Two ways to turn off the interval timer once we're finished. Firstly, we can go into the menu and disable it, or a simple matter of turning the camera off and turning it back on again, and it's ready to go as per normal. As you remember from our 101 video, I showed you that this camera can hold two memory cards, a compact flash and an SD. Let's go through the menu system and have a look at the options about saving to both cards or saving to each card individually. To access this option, we need to use the menu key, navigate across to our yellow menus, and it'll be the very first item on our yellow menus. It says record function plus card/folder select. If we press set, we can jump in here and have a closer look. In the record function, the camera is defaulted to standard. What this means is that it will record one file to the primary card. But if I put two cards in the camera, then I have some options available to me. I can change this standard setting to auto switch card, which essentially means when the first card is full, it will start recording to the second card. Another option is record separately. This will allow the camera to record the individual file to both cards, creating a redundancy or backup. The last option is record to multiple. What this allows us to do is to record two separate file sizes to two different cards. So for example, if I had a large compact flash card in here, I could store my RAWs on that card and then also store maybe a smaller JPEG onto the SD card. A common question we're asked is, should I shoot RAW? Let's first understand where these settings are and how to change them, and we'll explain the differences between RAW and JPEG. To get into our camera's image quality settings, we go into our menu, and it is the very first red menu option. It says image quality. If I press set, it allows me to go and have a look at the different sized RAW files and JPEG options that I can save to my memory card. Firstly, to change our RAW file size, we use our top multifunction wheel to navigate between turning RAW off, RAW on, medium or small RAW. To change our JPEG options, we use the rear multifunction wheel to change between large JPEG, medium and small. A quick explanation of the difference between RAW and JPEG is a JPEG file is pre-compressed by the camera, as where a RAW file takes all of the data recorded by the sensor to the memory card. A lot of people choose to shoot RAW photos if they are post-processing their images in third-party software. That way they can get exactly what they want out of the image. To play back our images and have a look at what we've taken so far, we can hit the play button down the bottom left-hand corner of the camera. To navigate our photos to start with, we can just use the rear wheel to go forwards and backwards in time, one frame at a time. If I was to use the top wheel, I would navigate through the photos 10 frames at a time. This could help scrub to a certain point within your library that you'd like to slow down and have a look at the individual photos. Another feature within Play is we can actually magnify and have a closer look at the image to double check focus or even look at some of the minor details. To do this, we simply hit the magnifying glass button, which is located directly above the playback button. To magnify further, we can use the top multifunction wheel to zoom in. We can then use the joystick up, down, left, right to navigate through the image to see greater detail. Again, to zoom out, simply use the top multifunction dial to turn to the left. When finished, you can either hit the playback button again, or you can simply tap the shutter to take another photo. A lot of people like to change some of the functions on their 7D Mark II. Let's have a quick look at the custom functions on this model and some of the options that are available to change. There's a couple of ways to get to our custom functions menus. Firstly, we can go through the menu key, navigate across into our custom functions, which you will find over in the setup of the camera in the orange settings, custom controls. A quicker way to get to this custom controls menu is to use our Q button, navigate across to the picture of the camera with the three lines. Press set, it'll take us straight to our custom controls menu. Very quick and easy access. It'll allow us to change settings and get back to shooting as soon as possible. One of the most popular changes that people like to do to their 7D Mark II is disable the front button autofocus and rely solely on rear AF, also known as AF on. To do this, we go into our custom controls menu, select the very first option, which currently says AF, and we change the shutter button half press function to metering start. Set to confirm, and we're ready to shoot. What this means is that now the half button press on the shutter will no longer autofocus the camera. It's relying on you to use your right rear thumb to hold down the AF on button to gain focus. Essentially in this custom controls menu, it's up to you to navigate through to have a look at some of the options. But what we can do in here is we can essentially assign a task to any of the keys that we've explained in this video. For example, I mentioned this rear multifunction dial, which is exclusive to the 7D Mark II. We can actually go in here and change that dial. As default, it's set to off, but we can change that dial's function to direct our AF point selection, to do our exposure locking, exposure holding. We can select different autofocus points, or in my case, I set mine to adjust the ISO. Again, to get out of these menus, we can either push the menu button to go backwards or simply tap the shutter button to continue shooting. So what happens if it all goes wrong? If you've played with the custom functions and you're not quite sure what happened, we can always reset the camera back to factory defaults. To do this, follow me into the menus now. What we've got to do is navigate through our menus until we get into our fourth yellow menu, where you will find an option that says clear all camera settings. Press set, come across to OK to confirm. The camera will say it's busy for a couple of seconds, and then we're ready to start shooting again. Be aware that clearing all camera settings resets all of your custom functions. If you want to specifically just clear the custom functions that you may have played with, again, let's jump into the menu and navigate with me. Come across into the orange menus, and the very last orange menu, you will find clear all custom functions. Press set, come across to OK, set one more time. And what that will do is it will just set up all of those custom functions back like it was the day that you pulled it out of the box. So next we're going to have a look at the bulb timer function of this model. To get into bulb mode to start with, I'm going to use my top mode dial and select the letter B. A quick explanation of what bulb mode is. It's for an extended exposure that's going to be longer than 30 seconds. If we were to shoot anything 30 seconds or less, we can cover this in TV or manual modes quite easily. But if I have some filters on the camera and I want to expose the sensor for potentially 2, 3 or 4 minutes, I need to select the bulb function mode. On previous models, this would require an external release cable to be activated and released manually. This model, however, has an inbuilt bulb timer. Let's navigate the menus together to find out how to set this. So you'll see on the rear screen, I am in bulb mode. All I've got to do is hit menu, navigate across in our red menus until you see the function bulb timer. Press set to enable this timer. Before I hit OK one more time, I have the option to push the info button and change the length of time of my timer. So let's change this to a minute. I can go anywhere up to multiple hours, minutes and seconds. Once I've got to my desired time, I come down, press OK to confirm. You'll now notice in the menu it has bulb timer set to 1 minute. Another indicator is on the top screen. You'll see a small bulb timer symbol appear. This means when I press the shutter to release the frame, it will time for 1 minute and then stop. To take the camera out of bulb timer, I can go back into the menu and disable it, or simply once again, turn the camera off and turn the camera back on to clear that bulb timer, and I'm ready to shoot again. Like all EOS Canon cameras, there are my picture style settings. The 7D Mark II has a quick button to access these. Up the top left, you'll notice a picture of a paintbrush. If we press this button, we have access to 3 creative modes. Let's look at my picture styles first. The my picture style settings on this camera offer settings such as automatic, standard, portrait, landscape, neutral, and faithful. What does this mean? Essentially, each of these picture styles adjust the saturation, contrast, and sharpness of the photos that you are taking. So for example, if you like a flat file, you may select neutral, which doesn't amplify any of these signals. However, if you're shooting some nice sunsets and sunrises, you may choose the landscape feature, which will increase the contrast on the saved file. Another popular picture style to navigate is to monochrome. This will take black and white photos in essence. There is a little further information that you can add to your monochrome settings though. By hitting info, you can now custom change your sharpness, your contrast. You can even add filter effects. The filter effects can be explored to select a certain color to amplify, which adds a new dimension to your black and white photography. Thanks for watching this video on the 7D Mark II. I hope it's helped you understand a few more of the buttons and functions that are available on this camera, and that you take this information out into the field. Happy shooting.